Well, according to data from Vanguard Group, a record 3.6% of workers tapped into their 401k savings in 2023 as hardship loans amid high inflation continued. Now, typically, early withdrawals come with a 10% tax penalty from the IRS plus income tax on that money you withdraw. So for more on how to manage today's financial emergencies without jeopardizing your future savings, let's bring in Mary Ryan, Vanguard's Senior Financial Advisor. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mary. So talk about this record share of withdrawals that we've seen from people coming out of their 401ks. Why do you think we're seeing that, given some of the penalties that can come with hardship withdrawals?
Thank you so much, Rochelle. Looking forward to talking with you today. That is a stat that has come out. It is not really my area of expertise here at Vanguard, but I will say this. When looking at your retirement accounts, looking at your plans, there are opportunities that perhaps you could take advantage of should you need the money. But most importantly is you want to save that money too.
So let's talk about some of those tips to get started on the right footing, Mary. As Americans sort of consider what their budget is right now, how much of that should they be setting aside for savings?
I think it depends on the goal. So when looking at savings, there you could have different goals. You could have a shorter term goal, like, for example, you want to buy a house or you need to get a new car, want to plan a trip, things like that. And that's a shorter term goal. If you're looking for your long-term goals, such as retirement, and you have a 401k or a 403b, you want to make sure that you do at the very least, make sure that you're hitting your match that is usually offered within those plans. It's important, though, to make sure you pay attention to what your goal is, regardless, so that you stay focused on it and you make sure you're doing what you need to do to get there.
And Mary, of course, we are in this season where people are getting their bonuses, getting their annual raises. It can be hard to create better habits when you haven't already got them in place. What should you do if you do come into a chunk of money or a considerable raise in your income?
So like anything else, one of the things I suggest to people, and I think whether it's a bonus or particularly a raise in income, things like that, many companies will allow you to go ahead and you get your paycheck. It comes in, full paycheck right into your checking account. But they also may allow you to say, let's put some money aside in just a separate savings account so you don't have to think about it. So now you've got this extra money from a bonus or you've got extra money for your salary. You just put it aside automatically. That also plays in again into perhaps increasing the amount that you're putting into a retirement plan. Make sure you take advantage of that as well. But to be disciplined about it, and I keep going back to the same theme, but knowing your why, knowing why you want to save that money and to be very, very clear about it as to why you're saving that money.
Mary, you talk about sort of reassessing your budget. I mean, this is one of those things where I think Americans look at their budget monthly and say, what are the areas that are most variable, the areas where you can actually cut? I mean, when you're advising clients, what do you tell them as they sort of look at their monthly expenses?
So I tell them to get out a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, and write down and put in there every place your money's going. Everything, not just your regular bills, but let's say you usually take your lunch, but you went out to lunch instead. Every single penny, where is it going? So that you can look at that and really understand the outflows. And if you can look at that and understand those outflows more, and there's certain things you can control, like that lunch or that cup of coffee, things like that, it adds up. And to pay attention to where you're spending your money. And it isn't just on bills, usually.
And Mary, to that point, with keeping inflation in mind, sometimes, what you originally budgeted for something, the cost of that may change considerably over time. What are some of the best ways to sort of keep refreshing your financial plan and really the framework that you have there so that you can still meet the cost of living and contribute to your savings?
Yes, so exactly like you're saying, whether it's inflation or some bill comes in, there's always some darn thing that's going to get you out of whack and make sure that you sort of have to readjust how you're saving and what you're doing. I'm going to go back to the goal, pay attention to that because that will help you to maybe, again, peel back on something else a little bit. But at the end of the day, when you have some money coming in, save it separately. have it go in separately, as we talked about before, but there's always going to be something that is going to get in your way. But if you stay focused on it and pay attention to it and pay attention to your dollars, and as I say, every little bit makes a difference in what you're spending and what you're putting out there. So maybe you don't go to lunch. Maybe you change a few things and you don't get that cup of coffee.
And Mary, if you do get a chunk of money, you're like, look, I have student loan debt, but I also want to save, but I also want to not miss out on some of the rallies that I've seen in the markets. How should people prioritize what to do first so that they can make the most of their savings and not be tempted to sort of funnel everything into one thing when they really should be paying off perhaps something that's a high interest credit card?
Exactly to your point. If it's a high interest credit card or you do have debt, I would strongly encourage starting to whittle that down the best you can. Again, some of that money that's coming in, perhaps you can put it towards that retirement 401k plan, just a little bit more in there. But again, you're exactly right. You want to pay down that high debt that's going to cost you a lot in those interest rates. So pay attention to that. If there's opportunities for you in looking at that debt and being able to say, if I put a little bit more in there, perhaps it'll take it down a bit further. Maybe I can refinance it, things like that. But today's rates, it's tough. The rates are high, and they're very difficult, especially if you have that credit card debt. So I would encourage spending that down, paying that down as much as possible.